Good day, everybody, and welcome back to the IT 101 series from NASTD. I'm Brad Steele. I'm Senior Director of Unified Communications at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and an NASTD past president. NASTD is the National Association of State Technology Directors, and it is made up of technology professionals serving state government. It's a member-driven organization whose purpose is to advance and promote the effective use of information technology and services to improve the operation of state government. Article 1, Section 2, under Purpose and Goals of the NASTD Constitution, has the second goal as engage in programs for the training, education, and development of technology professionals from all areas of state government. To accomplish this goal, we decided to put together a set of educational videos that we call IT 101 sessions to help with this education. In these videos, we are asking industry leaders from our corporate affiliate community 10 or so plus or minus questions, pretty standard in their content, about the technology or service in question. If you haven't seen the other videos that we put together, I ask that you please refer to the NASTD website, nastd.org, for a link to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous videos. Once you're on our YouTube channel, I do ask that you subscribe so that we can qualify for a custom YouTube link. So today's subject is a little bit different. It's not necessarily a technology, but it is something that is all that I think affects all of us. And based on the recent meetings that we've had among state members, I think it's very pertinent at this time. In particular, we'll be talking about chargeback and how it relates to OMB Circular 87 GAAP requirements. For today's session, we will be working with our CAC partner, Parsolvo, and Tim Bardo, who is active with NASTD, has arranged for us to have this discussion today with Tim Cook. So Tim is the recurring revenue evangelist for NASTD partner Parsolvo's Blue Logic Blue IQ solution platform. Tim works with some of the most innovative state agencies and organizations in the world as they look to transform the way that they engage their customers, manage the business, and create amazing experiences. Tim is a true subject matter expert regarding digital disruption, efficiency, and effectiveness. He has held previous executive positions with Votella, Force 3, and Cisco Systems. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Brad. Happy to be here.
So on each of these sessions, I ask people to provide a bio and then at least one fun fact. And that led to a item which Tim and I could probably go on for an entire other segment. Maybe we'll do that in IT 101 plus segment. Some of you may know this or may not, but I actually have my father and my uncle, when they were young teenagers, my father was 15, they ran away to the circus. And my uncle is a world famous trapeze artist. He was in the Guinness Book of World Records. He's in the circus, the acrobatic, and the trapeze halls of fame. And so I grew up in a circus life. I know that doesn't surprise any of you who know me. So that having been said, Tim, would you like to tell us your interesting circus story?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we were preparing for the recording, Brad asked me, he told me, he said, I'm going to ask this question. And I thought my go-to that no one can beat is that I grew up with the circus. So that immediately led to us going way over our time slot for that call. But yeah, I did also grow up with the circus. Not nearly as exciting as Brad's story. My father was a controller for Ringling Brothers, but I was in the circus many times. Whenever the circus came to town, they'd always stick me somewhere. I've been in the clown car. I've been on wagons behind elephants. Ridden donkeys. You name it. I've done it. Within the circus environment. On the floor there. Nothing in the air. But yeah, it's nice to make a connection with another circus person.
So we will have to talk more in Seattle. So on a less adventuresome note, but much more important actually in the grand scheme of things, let's talk about chargeback. The states are really interested in this. We just recently had a meeting to discuss how different states are handling chargeback. And when you brought this subject up, it just seemed very pertinent, as I said. But your subject that you have here has chargeback as it relates to OMB Circular 87 GAAP requirements. So what is that?
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to kind of dial in on this topic is, we actually did recently deploy a chargeback solution for the state of Oregon. And when I asked, what was really the driving factor, one of the primary factors was, compliance with OMB Circular 87. So in this case, IT chargeback really is a method of charging internal customers for IT services that they use. And state agencies are generally held to a higher standard for chargeback to comply with OMB Circular 87. And that standard really is generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. And they, in the circular, they can spell this out. But what does that mean? So you have to comply with GAAP principles. Chargeback requires double entry, accrual-based accounting of financial transactions. And everybody already knows what this means, but it sounds kind of fancy when you put it into these financial terms. And really, it just means that an invoice to internal customers must be generated from a financial platform that can support the principles of double entry and accrual-based accounting. So when evaluating some type of a chargeback solution, it's important that you evaluate whether that solution can really support those GAAP principles. And many of the transactions that occur, in a chargeback environment could occur, can occur somewhat randomly. That's kind of when that it's probably not GAAP principles. If you would know if it's GAAP principles, if the charge and the expense and the charge were recognized in the same period. So that's kind of a couple indicators there. Credit, debits, charges and payments recognized in the same period are some things to look at when it comes to meeting those GAAP standards.
Okay. So first follow-up question. This doesn't count as question 2 just yet. So what is OMB 87?
So that's a good question. I'm going to quote right out of the circular itself. So this is put out Office of Management and Budget, of course. Actually, interestingly enough, the reporting is managed by HHS. So but the circular establishes principles and standards for determining costs for federal awards carried out through grants, cost reimbursement contracts, and other agreements with state and local governments and federally recognized Indian tribal governments. So, that's how the OMB defines Circular 87. Further definitions, if you as you get into this document and kind of how this all ties back to chargeback, is in attachment C within the circular, where they address billed central services. And billed central services, by definition, we're calling that chargeback in this, as this subject. But the way they define it, billed central services means central services that are billed to benefit agencies and/or programs on an individual fee-for-service or similar basis. Typical examples of billed central services include computer services, transportation services, insurance, and fringe benefits. And attachment C addresses how to create a cost allocation plan, which is required for billed central services to be in compliance with OMB Circular 87.
Okay, and so I'm assuming that there are some automation or some technology or something of those sorts. What do we have available to us to help calculating and applying chargebacks?
Yeah, so there is probably a spectrum of solutions that could be deployed to support chargeback, and it really depends on the complexity level of the chargeback method. Often the method is influenced by how a vendor invoices or charges for their own services, and then so what we've been able to do is define really kind of 7 different types of chargeback scenarios. So starting with the simplest, the first 3, which I'll review, really can kind of be managed by a combination of spreadsheets and accounting platforms. You can get away without real sophisticated technology. But the last 4, and I'll kind of tell you when, I'll go through these and kind of, put some focus on these. Really, you need a more sophisticated financial platform, like our platform, BlueLogix, BlueIQ, that's capable of reading this data from multiple sources, sometimes dozens of sources, mediating the data that they're consuming. This would be charging data coming from vendors or third-party platforms, or even ITFM platforms, and then so there's going to mediate it or normalize it, and then rate the usage and calculate any charges, and then be able to allocate those charges across multiple agencies with an invoice, a gap generated invoice. So I'll kind of go through these to kind of help you maybe understand how the complexity builds, starting with the simplest, which is basically what we define as a high level allocation of cost, which is just simply dividing up equally the cost amongst, in our case, agencies. So that's the simplest. Then there's a low level allocation, so a little bit more complexity, and maybe we're dividing the expenses up not evenly, but maybe based on number of users within an agency. Still relatively simple. I just kind of need to know some very simple counts and some simple math and divide by X and to calculate this chargeback. And then there's the direct cost, which again is relatively easy. So it's a charge based on dedicated ownerships. For example, if an agency procured a specific solution just for their exclusive use, clearly that's relatively easy. When you move beyond that, so that was the first 3. So the next one, number 4, is measured resource usage, which would be charges based on the actual use of a specific IT resource, like bandwidth or storage. So you need some way to be able to count that, and it's a dynamic count. It's not based on each user could be using a different amount. So it's a measured resource usage. That's number 4. You're going to need a billing platform, or a chargeback platform, really to kind of automate the rest of these. Number 5 is a tiered flat rate, which are charges based on an allocated use, whether it's used or not. So you get an X amount of use in tier 1, X amount of use in tier 2, and you just graduate up the tiers as you continue your use. The 6, we see this a lot. This is very a very dominant charging method, especially in the compute space, which is a negotiated flat rate, which is a charge based on projected use. So give me a price for a year's worth of this much, and then oftentimes there is an overage if I exceed that, whatever that might be, whatever that metric might be, and so the 7th and most complex is what we call service-based pricing, which is measured against a pool of prepaid use, with either a top-up for overage. So after I've used it all, I have to pay for more, or an overage rate applied to the consumption. And this kind of has to happen in real time, because I need to know when you've gotten to your limit. So that is the most complex. We actually don't see that a lot. Most of the automation we see in chargeback is across the measured resource usage, the tiered flat rate, or the negotiated flat rate.
Okay. So you're basically taking different methods of being billed by the vendors, depending on what the service is, and you're allocating it out to the folks who are using it. So obviously, having that automated, having that solution in place to help with that is going to be beneficial. What benefits does it add, and what does it replace or supplement that we already have in place within our organizations?
So what we've seen is a lot of manual processes that are people are working with spreadsheets, and maybe this because they started with the simple, and now they're kind of evolved to the complex, and they're kind of stuck with this spreadsheet method. But then it gets to a point where you really just can't manually get this data in fast enough before the next billing period comes around, and you have to get your charges back out again. So a dedicated chargeback solution, it typically has a very powerful mediation engine that can consume charging data from many internal and external sources, and then mediate those or normalize the charges for allocation across the internal users. And this replaces that manual process. Additionally, it enables further automation against the reconciliation process. So if I'm now consuming data, let's say from a third-party vendor, I'm consuming that as my cost data. If I can store cost data in a system that it could reconcile against, I can determine whether there's any mismatch between what I should be paying and what I'm getting charged, not only just for the cost itself, but also for the number of users or the amount of usage that they're saying I use, and that I believe I have actually used based on my invoicing. So the reconciliation process is an important process that having some automation will really help tighten that up.
And I can only imagine that with the difficulty in hiring people these days, especially for states, that having that automated as opposed to relying on that manual process is critical.
Absolutely, yes.
So this sounds pretty complex, and you've touched on some of the intricacies of what it'll do. But what are some of the major changes that have happened in the technology over the last few years?
Well, I think there's kind of two changes that have occurred. One is that is the push to software as a service, and then the other is just the sophistication or the evolution of the software itself. So the movement to SaaS has changed both the delivery and the development of chargeback software, and we're defining SaaS as really one instance of software that's multi-tenant that everyone can use, and what that does is it makes it very very efficient to be able to deploy and manage at scale. So from a delivery standpoint, a SaaS chargeback solution can be delivered relatively quickly and inexpensively. From a development perspective, SaaS solutions are inherently rich in capability, as any development must be done in a SaaS environment for all users. So if one state were to come to us and say, "Hey, we have this specific requirement," well, we'll build that requirement in for the state, but then it'll be available for everyone to use. We can't just write a script for one company like you could if you had a dedicated piece of software. We have to take things in and figure out how are we going to write this so that everybody can benefit from that functionality. Additionally, SaaS it can be more secure, leveraging all of the cloud security applications out there. Within we use AWS's architecture. So having some SOC 2 compliance and all those things, of course, are table stakes these days. But we as a company can get there a lot easier leveraging technology from providers like AWS.
All right. And how have the last couple of years, the pandemic, the move to remote work, all of those things, how has that affected the effort?
Well, what we've seen is that, and I'm sure everyone's seen this, but as what COVID has kind of pushed the technology to be able to support is teleworkers or working from home. And so therefore, in many cases, delivering that level of service, is, really most efficiently done by leveraging the cloud. So as we move from, what maybe was a premise-based solution to a cloud solution, that is enabled by a vendor, the vendors are changing the way that they're charging, from going from a CapEx expenditure, maybe where I bought a piece of hardware and a maintenance contracts and software upgrades, to now, a monthly recurring fee based on what you use. So the way that the vendors are charging for their services is really changing the way that states have to be, or states need to be able to support the way that they charge in turn down to the agencies that they're charging back.
And that must be even more complex to try and do when you're in that transitional state, when you have some items on premise and some items in the cloud, and kind of in that transition. It must be more complex to try and do calculations on.
It is. I think that the ability to support both internal and external data is something that is required by all, because many of the systems that states have are older platforms, and the ability to consume data therefore needs to be, you need to have some flexibility there. So do you consume it via API? Well, maybe in some cases you can, and that's the best way to consume it. In other cases, it might just be a simple flat file, where you're just generating a report out of a system into some type of a CSV file, and we're reading it that way. Otherwise, there might be some type of an SDK or software development kit to be able to build some integration that way. So having flexibility on how you're going to get the data and how you're going to consume the data is really important.
And just so you know, you just struck up something. For those of you who haven't seen them, I did do a session on SDK and APIs a few sessions ago for IT 101. So if you need to know more about those subjects, look into the library. All right, so if we're looking at possibly doing something with our chargeback mechanism, what are my use cases for implementing an automated system?
Well, centralized management and delivery of IT solutions and services, often moving from on-prem to the cloud, hybrid or SaaS solutions, typically, fall into desktop, so endpoints, infrastructure, LAN circuits, storage, network storage, unified communications, applications, across the board, security, software and solutions, cloud services, infrastructure, and the list goes on. I mean, really, it's pretty much, all IT services, today are moving from prem, if they haven't already, to the cloud. So as that happens, the ability to have systems in place to manage that transition is important for a lot of our customers.
All right, and so you can help us calculate things. You can help us formulate what our chargeback should be. But what other challenges can IT chargeback solve for me?
Well, I think one of the things it does is it helps with security compliance. So unauthorized use or access of IT solutions. That's just the whole concept behind centralizing IT. I can kind of have one place where I can control access and manage security. The other is the inefficient expense for resources that aren't centralized. So cost challenges, being able to reduce the cost by negotiating larger enterprise agreements is something that IT Chargeback can help with. And then being able to align with the compliance requirements for GAAP around the OMB Circular 87, and it is also a very important piece that interestingly enough sometimes is overlooked.
All right, and I'm going to just kind of divert again here. So there's OMB Circular 87 and those compliance items, but I'm sure that states have their own specifications on what they need to do as well that might differ from the OMB circular.
Yeah, I think that each state is going to approach this differently. Everyone's coming from a different place. I think a lot of people are going, have a similar vision as to where they want to go, but where they're starting from is very broad and wide, and of course, yes, it's really driven by the state requirements, and I think that many of those requirements are influenced by the federal compliance.
Okay. All right. So if I'm going to be putting this in place, what hardware or software would I need to procure?
Well, I love that question, because you won't have to procure any hardware or software. Because we're SaaS, and most of our competitors are SaaS, and so just to kind of give you an idea as to how a solution like ours, and this is pretty similar across the board, is charged for. We typically charge for the initial onboarding, and onboarding took us probably about 6 months. It could be done in less, and could be more, depending on what we define as the requirements. And then so there's a fee for onboarding, and then our charges are for the platform are tied to the use of the platform, which is tied around the revenue. So actually, our charging method is number 6. So it is. So we would negotiate, say, okay, I want to put through $100 million worth of charges through the platform. Let's talk about what that might be, and for the year. And then if you go over that, there might be some overage. But that's it. There's no cost for hardware. There's no cost for for hosting, or no cost for additional support. It's a traditional SaaS model where all your upgrades are included, any bug fixes or whatever, everything's kind of done as a community.
So the first charge that goes in the chargeback solution is the charges for the chargeback solution.
Yes. Yeah. We'll go ahead and put those in there for you if you'd like.
There you go. Okay. So speaking of charges going in, what does the cost structure look like for something like this? As you said, it's a SaaS solution, so I'm assuming it's just a monthly recurring cost.
It is a monthly recurring cost. Once we get past the onboarding kind of fixed professional services, non-recurring charge, which the important piece there is really taking the time to scope the requirements out really well. With this kind of solution, the devil really is in the details. So having multiple workshops, focused around even things, like data migration can be a real stickler, how you're going to mediate the data, how the charges are going to be managed, being able to work with the agencies to be able to deploy a solution at the agency level so that the agencies can view their charges and approve them. Is something that was important for our customer at State of Oregon. So defining these things ahead of time is really important. And that the cost for that is, you can start small, minimally viable product, and go big eventually. Or you can kind of, just take what you have and move it over, which is what we did for Oregon. So that front end cost may vary, but yeah. Once you move into the platform fees, it's a monthly recurring based on charges that flow through the platform on a monthly basis. Now we negotiated an annual agreement, to pay it in advance. So that worked better for the budget scenario we were under with that customer. But there are many different ways to do this, but fundamentally that's really where we start with in defining the pricing, is how much revenue we're going to be pushing to the platform annually.
Okay. So getting ready to get started on this. Here I go. I'm ready to go. What do I need to consider?
Well, I think there's a couple things that you probably want to make sure that you have some type of a framework in place, a chargeback framework in place that considers automating the chargeback process around a service or solution catalog. So that catalog should be your source of truth for your charges. And sometimes that catalog is a real challenge because it may sit in multiple places. So it may be sitting in your ITSM solution. It may be sitting in a PSA, professional services automation solution. It may be, so defining where that source of truth is and making sure that that catalog is well defined really is important. And then having all of the right stakeholders involved in the process is really a critical point, because it does touch a lot of people and specifically down at the agency level. So those are the things that I think stand out to me as important things to consider.
All right. And are there any limitations or restrictions that I should be aware of? Anything that
I would say that so a chargeback solution like ours is not an ITSM solution. It's not an IT financial management solution. Those really are different motions. And so in considering a solution like ours, we shouldn't assume that we can do what those other solutions can do, and really vice versa. It's very purpose built, very specific for what we've talked about today. And then also because of that, it's important to consider how a platform, how this platform is going to integrate with these other solutions outside of it. So how is it going to integrate with the ITSM or ITFM or PSA or other technologies that it's kind of required to be part of from a workflow standpoint, right? So we're really trying to automate the workflow from end to end instead of having to hop in and out of solutions. And things like single sign-on and so forth are really important to be able to kind of tie a process together, from one end to the other.
All right. I told you that this would be a relatively painless experience. And we're down to our last question. So it's the same question I ask every time, no matter what the solution, no matter what the topic at hand is. And that is, what else do I need to know? What did I forget to ask you?
I think that, what we have found is that you're going to have an idea as to what it is that what your vision is, what you want to get out of this solution. And that idea will be influenced by your vendor, because they'll have some best practices that they'll, probably want to share with you. It'll be influenced by maybe other states and other folks you talk to, certainly the NASD audience. Everyone has very good information here, and so you'll have this vision. Be prepared once you've gotten to the end of the rainbow to start all over again, and because you have learned so much that you should plan on kind of what we call rediscovery, rediscovering the process again. And so it really is an evolution to continue to get more and more and more and more efficient. So don't expect that this is going to be when you're finished doing something like that we're done, on to the next thing. You really should plan for some continued evolution of the process. And as vendors, again, we're in the middle of this digital transformation, right? So as more and more vendors come on with more and more products that are being driven from the cloud, you'll have to continue to evolve how you deliver your chargeback or your charges back down to your agencies.
Yeah, it's like maintaining my 50-year-old house. It's never done. Yeah. There's always one more project on the horizon. So.
Yeah, I have plenty of those.
So awesome. This again, for me was very informative, very good information. And as I said, based on, the meetings that we've been having with the state members, I think this will be very well received. So thank you very much again, Tim Cook. And again, Tim is the recurring revenue evangelist for NASTD partner Parsolvo's Blue Logic's Blue IQ solution platform. And thank you to Tim Bartow for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to be part of the NASD community, and look forward to more conversation.
Excellent. And thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you on our next IT 101 series, wherever it takes us. Thank you.